much, Brecht, and just a fabulous presentation from Mark Smith. I hope that in 5 years from now, you kind of think of me as you do about Mark. Of course, my name is much more difficult to pronounce, so it'll probably take you 5 years to learn how to say my name. So please just call me Sean. But yeah, so I'm the founder and CEO of Nanalysis. We're positioned to be the global leaders in MRI for industrial applications. So I'm sure everyone here knows what an MRI machine is, and I hope you're thinking, what does he mean by industrial applications? So I'll do my best to answer that. Just some investment highlights before I start to get into what we do. So unlike a lot of companies that have a new listing on the TSX Venture Exchange where we trade now, we've proven out pretty much all of our business. So we have patent-protected technology platform, proven commercial products that have been selling into the marketplace for several years. We have domestic manufacturing facilities, so no sort of low-cost offshore manufacturing. And a big part of that is to avoid IP threats. We have really strong balance sheet. If you look at our historical financials on CDAR, we've proven that we can manage to a profit if we need to. We have many levers that we can pull to sort of optimize our business going forward. No material long-term debt. We're facing a huge market opportunity, and our business is ready to scale right now. So I'm going to first try to create a link with what you already know. So you already know what an MRI machine is. Very large system made of sophisticated magnets, electronics, software using some pretty fancy math, and it analyzes a human being, and there's an image that's an output, and then some sort of a diagnosis. So what most people don't know is that magnetic resonance imaging is actually not the correct scientific name for what that machine is. The correct scientific name is nuclear magnetic resonance imaging. But about 30 years ago, when it became clear that these were going to go into the hospitals, some celebrities like Jane Fonda and so on said, well, what's going on? They're putting nuclear radiation in our hospitals and so on and so forth. And the industry got together and said, well, let's get rid of the word nuclear. And so that's why we all know it as an MRI machine today. And so that's important to note, because what our product is it entails the use of magnets and electronics and software and fancy math, but it's for a different application. But our type of instrument is referred to as a nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer. The science is spectroscopy. And we've miniaturized the superconducting magnets, the electronics, to create a product that is a cute little toaster-sized product about this size, and there'll be several images of it throughout the presentation. So from the perspective of the fundamental math and physics, a nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer is the same as a nuclear magnetic resonance imager, but the technology application is different, namely to test and measure things like lithium brine pools to see how much lithium is in there, or petrochemicals, or food. And so that's what we've done. The output is not an image per se. It's something like there's 5.5% lithium in this brine pool, or there's 13.1% THC in this cannabis product, right? But again, from a science perspective, it's the same thing as MRI. So, and in fact, that particular application of nuclear magnetic resonance has established itself over the last 20 years as the gold standard. Everybody in industry who needs to measure anything, whether it's a plastic, whether it's a petrochemical, a pharmaceutical, a food, they would all want to use that particular technique if they could. The problem is, and you can see that the configuration here is a little bit different than what you'd see in an MRI machine, but it's the same. Superconducting magnets, liquid helium and nitrogen to keep the superconducting magnets cool, electronics, and so on. It's a multi-million-dollar total cost of ownership proposition. So we've miniaturized that into a cute little benchtop product there that is $50,000 or $100,000. And so now that it's been miniaturized, we're seeing widespread adoption throughout industry for people who know that this technique is the best, but now it's more accessible. It's cheaper, it's completely safe, it's portable. You can drive it around in a van, put it in a cargo ship, and it doesn't need liquid helium and liquid nitrogen to keep the supercon magnets cool. So in that sense, it's analogous to, back in the day when there was only mainframe computers, and then one day somebody showed up with a personal computer, and some people said, well, why would you do that? So our market opportunity isn't every single human being in the world like it is for computers, but it's still a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity. Here's a look at some of our customers. Thus far, we've sold over 700 of our instruments, at an average selling price of, let's say, $70,000. So this is just a glimpse of some of them. One of the exciting aspects of this opportunity is it's truly global opportunity. The reasons why somebody buys in Boston or New York is different than why they would buy in rural India or Africa, but nevertheless, it's a global opportunity. The general market for scientific instrumentation, or some people prefer to say analytical instrumentation, is a very large, well-established market. Over $60 billion per year is spent on this type of technology. Right now, about $900 million per year is spent on nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. The vast majority of that is the very big systems, that weigh more than your car. For the miniaturized system, it's still small at this point. But we think it could become the majority of a market that grows to $3 billion per year sort of over the next decade or so. And there's two drivers for that. One is it's becoming standard equipment in every lab. So, I've traveled the world 5 times in the last several years, and these labs look the same whether you're in Malaysia or whether you're in London, England. The equipment in the labs in London, England might be more expensive and newer, but it's the same. You see about 30 different instruments of different types. Well, the only instrument that's not in there right now are these large instruments because they're just too expensive and too big. They need to be in specialized room. So now that they're miniaturized, they are becoming standard equipment in those labs. So that's the first driver for the growth that we're seeing. The second driver is new applications. Applications where in the past, nobody would have thought, well, you'd actually use a $50,000 or $100,000 scientific instrument for this. And we're seeing those applications from the marketplace right now. An example of that we've just press released is an agreement with Robert Bosch GmbH in Stuttgart, Germany, where they want to put 100,000 of our instruments on cargo ships to measure bunker fuel so that engines aren't damaged and that they comply with the new environmental standards to not have too much sulfur content. So that's something that nobody would have predicted 10 years ago. Oh, you're going to use an NMR spectrometer to do that. Another one is, for example, imaging of eggs to determine the gender of eggs before they hatch. Nobody would have thought you could actually use an NMR spectrometer to actually look inside those eggs to see what the gender is before they get spoiled. Just like it's maybe what's happening with humans, male eggs aren't deemed to be as valuable anymore, and so they're being thrown away, and there's millions and millions of dollars being wasted in that regard. So all kinds of exciting applications for NMR going forward, and that's what's driving that growth. With other types of analytical instruments, there's dozens of competitors. One of the unique things about this market opportunity is thus far, there's only been 2 companies that have succeeded at creating this type of instrument. Us and our arch competitor called Magritech are a small New Zealand-based company with revenue similar to ours, about 60 people. So we compete every single day around the world against that company. There's 3 other very large companies that have tried to bring a product to market and thus far have failed for different reasons. So that's one reason why our gross margins are around 70%. Other types of analytical instruments, the gross margins languish down at around 35–40%. And so we think that kind of healthy gross margin environment is going to continue with us for quite a long time. And this is a testament to the technical accomplishment of our people that these 3 very large NASDAQ-listed companies have failed to deliver a product to market. Our technology is patent protected, so we have several patents granted in the United States. We file in many jurisdictions as well, including China. And they have to do with the most difficult technical challenge associated with miniaturizing this type of technology. In addition to our patents, we also have proprietary manufacturing processes. So right in our facility in Calgary, Canada, we manufacture all these things from scratch. The only thing that we don't design and manufacture ourselves are the touchscreen PCs. Everything else, including the low noise power supplies and so on, are done right by our engineers in Calgary. So this is important because if you got a hold of one of our instruments in China, you took it apart, you had 5 PhDs that were smart enough to understand our patents, you still wouldn't be able to copy our instrument or reverse engineer it unless you knew exactly what we were doing in our proprietary manufacturing processes. So quite a high barrier to entry there. We've got several years of proven revenue. Admittedly, it's still at a pretty small base, but we're positioned for some pretty exciting growth going forward. And like I said before, gross margins at 70%, and we're trying to push them towards 75%. We did go public. I'm not sure if Brett mentioned that, but I think he might have maybe not got that quite right. We just went public in June, so we've been publicly traded now for just over 6 months. The main reason why we went public is because we wanted a pubco currency for our M&A strategy, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It wasn't to raise money. We're backed by the largest angel investor group in our region, and so it was going public because we want to execute an M&A strategy of about 5 companies that we want to buy. It's not a roll-up, and I'll get into that more as we go forward. So we see some exciting organic growth opportunities, and right now we sort of have a baseline business that's growing nicely, and it's selling our instrument sort of as a general purpose product, so people will buy it and they use it for different things. But we're right in the crux of an assessment period where we're analyzing, rebranding our product for specific vertical markets, like I mentioned, the one for cargo ships, as a cannabis analyzer, and all kind of illicit drug analyzer. And we'll when we enter in those markets, we'll invest more resources into it, we'll focus in on it, and then we'll probably sell on an OEM basis to companies like Bosch. And so what that'll do is that'll take our baseline business that's growing like this and kind of introduce a step change. And then once we sort of establish ourselves in that new vertical, then our baseline business will continue to grow, but from a higher base, and then repeat with the next vertical market. So that sort of encapsulates our organic growth strategy. We have an exciting product roadmap associated with that strategy to sell different versions of our product at higher price points and so on. It's important to note that when we do these partnerships that we've just press released, like with Bosch and also an illicit drug analyzer with the German police, we're not doing any customized work for them. We're not doing anything different than is already on our product roadmap. And then they're just adding a layer of value on top of that. Also, people always ask me about software as a service, so there is an opportunity to do extra processing on the cloud. Where people can pay per use or pay on a subscription basis. So that's an important part of our strategy going forward too, is to add on the recurring revenue model to our right now, which is our capital equipment based revenue model. So just to sort of like kind of go back into what the overall value proposition is with this miniaturization. This is what the output of those very large products look like. It's very complicated. It's very precise and information rich, but you need a PhD to understand this. So what we're all about is using software and AI to convert something that looks like this into something that looks like this. Or it's just a red light, green light, right? Like a police officer looks at it, red light means there's heroin in this suspicious powder. Green light means there's no heroin in this suspicious powder. So that's an important part of our initiative to drive adoption of this very well-known type of instrument. So yeah, no, this is sort of the M&A part of our strategy, and we're working on some exciting deals right now, and it's not a roll-up, so it's not acquiring similar companies. There are no similar companies per se, except for our arch competitor, but rather it's to assemble complementary companies such that very quickly we can put together a critical mass size of a company a lot faster than we could just by growing organically. So you should see some exciting news about this strategy going forward. And then if you add the organic growth and the M&A together, we think we're on a pretty attractive growth trajectory. So as I mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Nanalysis. By education, I have a master's degree in electrical engineering, but in my 25-year career approximately, I've been just a tech startup guy, so more on the business and finance side than actual development. My other businesses had nothing to do with lab instrumentation or NMR. My first one in the mid to late 90s was internet software. We anticipated that locations would be in phones at some point, and so we built a distributed software platform to allow wireless carriers to offer services beyond just enhanced 911, like I'm in trouble, but rather, hey, where's the nearest Thai food restaurant, and so on and so forth. So that allowed me to make a little bit of money in the early days when I first got married and was just getting into things, and never had a real job since. Raised 4 kids, and I've just been able to do tech startups. My last one was high performance computing. I got a $3 million investment from NVIDIA Corporation, one of the largest fabless semiconductor companies in the world. I was actually one of the first people in the world to use high-end graphics cards as very fast math coprocessors. In the year about 2000, I was hacking into these graphics cards with OpenGL and rendering to screen buffer and getting 10 times faster performance than Intel and AMD CPUs for professional applications where the OS couldn't manage the threading and so on. So that's a little bit of my background. I have a fabulous CFO who I rely on heavily, and then just a great complementary management team, whether it's marketing, sales, manufacturing. Senior independent board of directors as well. Chairman of the board actually came over with us from our RTO of the CPC we did with Hito Clotons, and so a very experienced gentleman in investment banking, M&A, fully designated accountant. Werner Gartner is the chairman of our audit committee. He's a former CFO of a large company called Novotel GPS, which was sold for $1 billion to a Swiss company called Hexagon. So again, fully designated financial professional, world-renowned scientist in the area of electromagnetics, Dr. Michael Krakiwsky. And then Steve Mazeros is our, other than my wife and I, is our largest shareholder. He's invested $3 million in cash into our company, a very successful real estate businessman. Here's a little bit of looking at our history, and we're coming to the end of the presentation here in the next couple of slides. But yeah, I founded the company about 11 years ago. In the early days, we had nothing but an idea, and I had 2 technologists that work for me that are still part of our team. Incidentally, I should mention that the original team from 11 years ago is still all together. They're all shareholders, and we've added other people, of course, but the original team is still all intact over 11-year period, but I think it's quite an accomplishment. We did all the things you'd expect to see in a quintessential technology startup in the early days. Mostly they were technology milestones, and then product milestones, and then manufacturing milestones and sales milestones. Along the way, our angel investor group, who Hito has met in Calgary several times, participated in every round of the financing. And then just recently, it sort of culminated in the RTO to go on the TSX Venture Exchange. We did a $6.5 million financing at 60 cents per share, which is higher than the current trading price. So I recommend you take a close look at that. And then, yeah, just to sort of round out the company, everybody talks about share price and so on, but if you just do some quick math, we have about 61 million outstanding shares. We've been trading at about 50 cents per share, so we got about a $30 million market cap ballpark. There are options out there and some warrants, but there's no cheap paper. For example, all the warrants are at 75 cents, so well above our current trading price. So on a fully diluted basis, if you include the cash, it's still valid to just sort of say 61 million outstanding shares times 50 cents in terms of our market cap. So that's the end of the presentation. All of our people are highly skilled, highly motivated. They're all shareholders in our company. About 60 people, most of whom are right in our facility in Calgary, but we also have some people in our German office, which we're expanding, and also in the United States. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.